Welcome to the Ubuntu Touch Q&A, the UBports Foundation show discussing the development of Ubuntu Touch and our community's questions. This is episode 27, streamed live on May 5th, 2018. We have a big show planned for you guys today. And here we are.
And he pressed the wrong button, so he left instead of muting himself. So let me continue where he left. So today we are joined by Florian.
Hello.
Joined by Jan.
Hello.
And Dalton that just left, but he will be right back. And here he is. And me, Marius. And we also today have a really special guest that I know you guys are really excited to listen to today. We have Todd, the CEO of Purism.
Hello, I'm happy to be here.
Sorry about that. That was the perfect time for the internet to go down.
Oh.
So, just as an introduction to those who aren't familiar, Todd, what is Purism as the company?
Sure. So Purism is actually a social purpose corporation. I'm actually seeing a screen not rendering, so I'm going to continue.
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay, great. So we're actually a social purpose corporation, which is a slightly different thing than a regular C corporation in that we actually stand for a social purpose. And what we, of course, believe is that at our core is that people should have secure computer devices that protect them rather than exploiting them. And so what we do is we bundle together hardware and software into convenient computers and, of course, the phone. And the goal of that is to respect users' rights to privacy, security, and freedom.
And the reason that we've asked you on today is because of UBports and Purism's recently announced partnership to bring Ubuntu Touch to your Librem 5 smartphone.
Yes, right. Mm-hmm.
So, just as an introduction to that, what is the Librem 5 and how did that project all get started?
Yeah, okay. Well, so the Librem 5 is our 5.5-inch mobile phone that we're actually building from scratch. So it's unlike really anything else before it, because this is looking to create a smartphone that's not Android based, and that's a challenge all the way from the hardware level through the software level. What got us there is Purism. When we started, we actually had the phone on our initial business plan and roadmap to get there because it's such a significant piece to solve this overall issue of digital rights. And so how we got there was by starting with laptops and then advancing through the supply chain to learn more and get greater contacts, because doing a phone is a lot harder than laptops. And then we'll be able to advance into other products as well. So the reason for getting to this point of the phone was really as mobile devices are obviously more pervasive than computers. And so we wanted to be able to solve that problem, and we knew we had to increment our way to get there.
And indeed, we have seen that everybody has a mobile phone at this point, and some of us have too many, but...
Yeah, I also have to say it's absolutely amazing to build something that's not Android based and that's not built by the same process that's going on. Is basically just a sweatshop down in China producing phones all the time, based on Android. So that's really amazing to see someone do that, and that's not something that's done before. So I can imagine it will be incredibly hard, or it is already incredibly hard.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's a huge challenge, mostly, and I think you're highlighting a couple of parts, is that Qualcomm and MediaTek really dominate the hardware side, and we have to avoid Qualcomm and MediaTek because they actually bundle together the baseband of the CPU. So as you can imagine, phones a handful of years ago, that everything was separated, but what they're doing is game of race to the bottom, right? So it's a commodity game. What they're trying to do is combine as much as they can into a single tin can. And so Qualcomm and MediaTek have a very, very tiny footprint that goes into phones today. And that actually makes it where it's impossible for us to separate them out and have control of all of those individual devices. So that's why the Librem 5 has to start from the schematics. So we're starting at schematics level, working through all of the EE, the MD, the ID, right? All of the acronyms, which make us to where we can actually manufacture a phone from scratch.
One thing that I have really noticed is with Android phones, most people don't know that everything is all on that one chip, and that both the Qualcomm, with Qualcomm, it's QC, the trusted execution environment, and the baseband basically have full access to all of the RAM on the phone.
Yes.
And you're not able to audit them.
Yeah, from a security story standpoint, it's a nightmare. But from other standpoints, from a freedom standpoint, or actually just separation, where if you wanted to have a phone that was, just Wi-Fi only, that what you end up with is it's, obviously it's all about control, and the centralized nature of baseband to CPU means that the carriers have complete control of the devices. And so that's something that we want to avoid, to be able to make sure that users have rights and can protect those rights.
Excellent. And farther than that, it means that it's a lot easier for smaller projects to get everything running on your hardware, especially since, as we'll mention later, the hardware choices seem to be really great for the Linux platform.
Yeah, so obviously one of the great things about this partnership with UBports is because we're taking the approach that by going at the hardware level and having hardware that's produced, which is the only way that Purism makes its money is by selling the hardware. So the software side of it is completely bundled and free. So therefore, partnering with other like-minded groups and communities just makes logical sense. But the reason that those communities are also really excited is because of our approach to the hardware by saying, hey, this will run a stock Linux kernel. We're upstreaming everything. And so by doing so, that means that all of the less strict downstream distributions can also run on the device. And that opens up a huge opportunity to advance non-Android in the mobile space.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things that is our biggest challenge is the porting part, and to get the actual binary blobs or the closed source Android drivers to run. And also a huge part of it is just the incredibly old kernel that Android is running. It's a security nightmare to have like 5 years old kernel that never gets updates, especially on the harder, the low end hardware. Those are especially really bad there in the kernel area.
Yeah, so what's going to be great about the CPU choice, so we have settled on the IMX8. IMX8M to be specific. When we ran the campaign, the IMX8 wasn't out yet, so we were trying to say, hedge our bets a little bit there, of saying, it'll be an IMX based phone, but we're not sure if it's IMX6 or IMX8, and that depended upon NXP's release of IMX8. So the good news is that they were on schedule. So Q1 of this year, we got IMX8 alpha boards. And then we can actually start looking at what's called SOMs, or system on modules. And those are where certain groups put out these system on modules, a lot of them for cars, automobile industry, and that we can utilize those for our initial development kits, and then advance toward our own entire design for the phone. So it's kind of a combination of a development kit's going to be our base board design with a SOM plugged onto it, which is an IMX8 based system on module, and then the phone is going to basically decouple that and spread it out into a phone platform with our own design. So that kind of gets us to where we can increment our way there. So the good news is that we know we're going to be on IMX8M. Right now, we're kind of doing the final testing across a few pieces that relate to power management. That's a big part. And then kind of some other low-level hardware initialization aspects. Because most of the time that IMX8, if it's used in a car, the standby mode is not really that important, but on a mobile device, it's critical. So those are some areas that we're continuing to test and advance. But the good news is every time, anytime we get back the test results, it's advancing things in a positive manner, right? So we haven't hit any major blockers yet, which I'm still kind of holding my breath until that'll happen, because I'm sure it will.
It's always something while designing software, hardware, anything. I do want to go back a bit. You did talk about advancing different communities and that Purism only makes money on the hardware. And I have seen rumors going around that saying, oh, this partnership with both Plasma Mobile and the one with UBports is just Purism hedging its bets against Fosh, the phone shell that you're creating for the Librem 5. What does this partnership between UBports and Purism actually mean for Purism?
I mean, that's a great question. So it's in no way is it hedging our bets. As a matter of fact, the area that we're investing heavily in is a software advancement with the phone shell. And so specifically, and I'll say that the software advancements that we're seeing are growing in speed. So it's very rapid, and the concerns that we had, let's say about keyboard input, right? On-screen keyboard, the ability for a lock screen to actually lock the computer or lock the device. So these are all the advancements that we've made where they're ahead of schedule, which is still kind of shocking. And so the phone shell is one that we're advancing and investing real resources and money, and a growing team. The team's already large and continuing to grow. So it's not about hedging the bets at all. It's actually entirely about, because there are communities and other users that are interested and they might not want to use phone shell. And so it's great to gather everybody around the community, such as, Plasma Mobile, that can also use the same hardware and the same low level aspects, right? So all the kernel level input that we provide is going to benefit Plasma Mobile. On the Ubuntu Touch side, that the advancements of being able to use a Linux kernel and be able to actually remove and replace the Android low-level systems of it and say, hey, now you can actually have Ubuntu Touch that's running native, is going to be really powerful. And so there's a significant user base that would be really interested in Ubuntu Touch running. And so that significant user base shouldn't be alienated. And so our approach is, it's great to have a larger community and larger ecosystem, and that overall diversity is going to help. So it's actually more about kind of, I'd say, celebrating diversity and giving users choice, because it also doesn't detract from our social purpose in any way to have additional options for users. The area that it does sort of bring up is, what are we going to default to when we ship the product? And so we've, made it clear that we will be defaulting to PureOS running upstream GNOME, which we're actively providing, but then also provide the option if a user wants to switch to make sure that it's supported and educated, so that way they can see, oh, I have choices if I'd like to choose something that's not the default.
Thank you for one with this diversity is if we go to the Purism developer website right now, the documentation for either Fosh or KDE Plasma, it's exactly that. It's writing for either or. What do you think that this variety of platforms does for the aspiring Librem 5 developer?
Yeah, so that is an area that we are really pushing pretty hard to have Flatpak based applications. And so what we'd want is that any developer who can write once and, I'm not going to say run everywhere, but run across the devices that they would like to have it be running on, that by utilizing Flatpak, which is what we're pushing for, and it looks like we're going to be able to do. So as an example, if they come, we're going to recommend using, let's say, GNOME Builder, and within GNOME Builder, you can write in whatever language you choose, use GTK bindings, create a Flatpak, and off you go. and those can, of course, run within Plasma Mobile. And so the question turns into, do you want to get more and more native than, let's say, a Flatpak? And so in those cases, we still do want to educate people saying, hey, this is if you want to write an application for, Ubuntu Touch, this is the direction to go. Or in the case of what the current documentation says is if you'd like to write something in Qt, this is another route you can take. So what we're trying to do is drive toward that app store that can actually be cross-platform within the, let's say, the overall Linux kernel ecosystem. But we still have some more work there. We've actually been doing a lot of testing across native versus Flatpak, and everything is looking good. We also are trying to have it be where PureOS can be a OS tree based instead of separate Debian based. But those are all things that we have to continue to evaluate as we, have the next 4 months or so that we're trying to finalize a bunch of those tests, and that all of that's going to be published in the developer documentation. So to summarize, the goal is that the developer documentation is going to be driving towards a unified platform. But in some cases, we also might have to still recommend, if you want to write once, run across the devices, or maybe you have to write once, port for the other ones, or maybe you need to write 3 times, depending on what the developer's needs are. So the goal is to provide as much information as we can and try to drive for ease of developer adoption.
That's always a good story for me. There are a few differences between our agreement between UBports and Purism and, say, the Phosh or KDE Plasma Mobile relationships. Can you explain a little bit how those are different?
Yeah, sure. So the Purism is the primary investor in Phosh, which is basically GNOME's upstream within PureOS, and that's the default. That's also going to be across our laptop, right? So we're going to be able to run GNOME on the laptops and also on the phone, and so we're really trying for an overall unified approach across those. So we're the primary investor in that. With Plasma Mobile, the relationship there is to support them as a first-class citizen on the phone, meaning providing dev kits where needed, attending conferences, actually having I think we have bi-weekly meetings with their team to make sure that they have any questions, we can answer them. So really just making sure that they are treated as appropriately to make sure that Plasma Mobile can run and be supported on the Librem 5 phone. For UBports, it's actually similar to that. The difference here, of course, is Plasma Mobile can run within PureOS as the overall distribution, as opposed to swapping out GNOME versus Plasma Mobile. In the UBports case, it's the same structure in that we are providing hardware and documentation and any internal questions, right? So a developer who wants to ask a question to our development team, we make ourselves available. And that's, so again, it's just really making sure that any advancements needing to be made, that everybody on our side knows that this is friendly, and we want to continue to advance these overall communities. And taking that approach just means that questions will get answered. Advancements need to be made. If there's a request for a certain thing within the kernel, right, and it benefits everybody, that of course we're making sure that we share that.
And that explains that very well. Now, we do have a few questions that we took from the forum. It actually came from Rogier, and I hope I pronounced his name right. It seems to be a culture of butchering people's names on this show. But they were specifically for you, so let's get those through.
Okay.
His first question was, with the Librem 5, are you on track with where you thought you'd be right now?
Yeah, so in a number of areas, I'd say we're ahead a lot on certain like the shell advancements, on-screen keyboard, so the certain app development. A big part about GTK being adaptive, so we can actually have we don't have to completely rewrite every application. It's actually modifying some classes. Those areas where we had a lot more questions, let's say bigger question marks, have started to fill in, and they're ahead of schedule. So this is going to get a little nuanced, but the development kits because the system on modules availability is tight, that we are still we're still on pace for maybe a late June delivery of dev kits, and that's but that's still kind of pending the availability of the system on module. So if they delay that, then that's going to delay our development kits, and they being the specific supplier of the system on module, which is the NXP's IMX8M on a module that we put into our development kit. Then there's some other areas. So that's for the development kit. For the phone, we're ahead of schedule for vendor selection across all the different areas. The mechanical design, industrial design, the EE work. So we're going to continue to, follow that along, but we're ahead of schedule in that case. So I think that right now the only area that sort of threw us a little bit has been the availability of system on module, and then there's also the Wi-Fi Bluetooth has been, we've been challenged, let's say, in selecting a good Wi-Fi Bluetooth combo card partner. So I'll describe a little bit more about the hardware, because I don't know how much of it has been published. So the phone itself is going to be, and actually the dev kit as well, these are all going to be modules. So the base board, right, which is going to include the CPU, RAM, and all the ports, is going to be the size of a phone. So it's actually going to be large. And that gives us enough space to then have M2 slots for our cellular baseband, and then also for our Wi-Fi Bluetooth. What that gets us is some huge advancements for users' control, and then also the ability to actually sever those, with a hardware kill switch. So what that means is that if you're in Europe, you can have a different baseband M2 card, and then you can have a different Wi-Fi Bluetooth card for the regions that you're in. So the Wi-Fi Bluetooth card is the area that we've been pushing really hard with some upstream suppliers, primarily around firmware, and making sure that the firmware, if we can get a wire 802.11 AC that can have power management, good power management. And so that's an area that we thought we could advance quickly. We had some really good meetings at Embedded World, and then some things have just sort of slowed down. So I'll stop there. But in all, I actually feel very optimistic, and we are on track with nearly everything. And the few things that aren't are really more in the rounding error, as opposed to like, oh boy, we really, failed.
Something's really wrong here. Go
Yes,
back.
right. Yes,
kind of
right.
thing. And you did mention a little bit about using the off-the-shelf LTE cards, and that should be very important for regulatory reasons.
Yes, you're highlighting something that a lot of people don't know, so that's great. And so yes, by using an M2 card, these are pre-made devices, so that means they have all the certifications, they have all of the, which is painful, right? The radio certifications, especially as all the different countries, and so it's very, very complicated. So our approach to sort of short circuit that is to say, well, let's actually make these modules, and then we can buy the, let's say, off-the-shelf modules to be able to plug in, and that, and then it has the added benefit of being able to actually cut the power, and it has the additional benefit of having users that could control it. So you can actually open up the phone, remove the module if you don't want it entirely, or you can hook in a different one if you're traveling to a different area or wanted to change it out for your own purposes.
Yeah, and while we are on radio, I also wanted to have a question in there about how when are these software wise, are these completely locked down because of rules? And I know FSC requires you to have lockdown, and how are you trying to avoid that? Maybe having a kill switch or something like that. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, so you cut out a little bit on the beginning of the question, so I will ask. sort of for a little clarification. So are you referring to when you say lockdown, are you referring to the firmware that's included in the baseband module?
Yeah, the firmware that's in the baseband, the one that says frequency and etc.
Yes, right. So the reasons that those are firmware that's included in the actual baseband is because they're certified, right? That you're not going to, let's say, tweak them in a manner that would be out of compliance with the regulations of whatever country or region that you're in. So what we take the very hardline approach that the Free Software Foundation has established for devices, right? So if we can treat it as a circuit, then it can be separate, and we can kill it with a hardware kill switch. So in the case of Wi-Fi Bluetooth, so let me also clarify, because some people start to get confused about firmware and binary blobs and etc. So firmware that's on a physical piece of hardware that we can treat as a circuit that's not software updatable is acceptable. And so that's what we would have in the Wi-Fi Bluetooth, we would also have in the baseband. And so then at the level lower than that, which is at the kernel level, or in our case, the hardware level, because we'll have hardware kill switches that will sever those, and you can say, I don't want them to communicate entirely. But all of the software that runs in it, and this is anything that's user updatable, which does include kernel level firmware, all of that is free software where the source code is available. So what you're referring to as lockdown is that will not be software updatable by our phone. It will be a module you can plug in as a physical hardware device, and it is treated as a circuit and is completely locked down. So if you wanted to replace it, you would be able to go out, buy a separate module, do with whatever you'd like to with that module, and then you'd be able to plug it into the phone, turn it on, meaning the hardware kill switch, and then you'd be able to activate it over the appropriate bus. Does that answer that question?
So this means oh yeah, my network is doing that sometimes. So in theory, you can, if you are living in a less restricted country, which doesn't have restriction on lockdowns here, you can in theory buy a completely open source one where you can modify everything you want on it, like frequency and etc.
I am unaware of any baseband modems that do provide free software-based the firmware that drives the actual radio. There are some efforts, I know with Osmocom, that there are some efforts to have that, but I think that even then you're still driving it with some on hardware firmware. So to answer your question, yes, if someone were to reverse engineer it and create one, which following the Osmocom BB advancements is probably a good area for that. And in that case, it's user controlled, right? So what we are going to provide is baseband modules that have the firmware embedded. And this is the same, to put it into context for those who are not familiar. This is the same type of firmware that's on like solid state drives, right? So it's firmware that comes on the devices. And so with Purism, we want to free as much as we can, right? We continue to dig deeper and deeper and deeper.
Right.
And so the same with the baseband or Wi-Fi Bluetooth, right? There's firmware that's on the tin can that drives it, but as long as it's not software updatable, then it can't all of a sudden turn malicious on you, right? And that's the important piece that we're wanting to avoid is having anything that would restrict users or cause them harm.
Right. Yeah, this is also to say to the people listening in, this is a lot better than any phones you can buy today. Every phone that you can buy today has lockdown on from everything from the Wi-Fi drivers to the display drivers to the touch drivers to basically anything. So this is purely awesome.
Yes, I mean when you're asking those nuanced questions, it sort of makes it sound like it's not as awesome. So I do appreciate the overview, because what we see is in the phone space, it's a duopoly, right? Users have no control. The options to do anything when you're talking about stripping all the binaries at the kernel level, right? And you have a non-working phone, right? You can't do anything with those devices. So this is why Purism had to go back to say, hey, we have to start the schematics. We have to then select a CPU that's not used in phones, IMX8M, right? There's no IMX8M phones. And so we have to manufacture that. Then we also have to write the software that's needed because Android has a near monopoly across all hardware for the phones. And so we need to unseat that monopoly and make it where users can actually have control. And that's a really important part of what we're doing. So our phone is not going to have any binaries at all. And we're on target to actually be to qualify for Free Software Foundation's Respects Your Freedom certification, which if anybody follows along, is a huge task to undertake on anything besides like a USB stick. So to be able to actually attain that for a phone, which is what we're striving for, and so far we're on path to be able to do so, and we're communicating with them regularly, them being Free Software Foundation regularly, and we'll share our development kit, and then of course we'll share our phone and the progress we've made, toward that goal.
And of course, this will always be updated on the blog.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll continue to update on the blog. We share an awful lot of information there, and that announcement would actually would of course warrant a significant amount of advancement. We'd probably make a press release, right? Free Software Foundation would also get behind it. But as far as other types of advancements that we're making, right? When we have the development kits out, that's going to be a big turning point for us because we're going to have 300 some odd active developers that we're trying to support, and making sure that they can write the applications or work together, which we've already started the community outreach, right, by publishing the developer documentation way early, before development kits are even out. So that way we can improve the documentation, get to that point of development kits, and advance things from there. So we'll continue to update everything from the blog, and that seems to get picked up far and wide as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to inject that I'm really, really awesome to see that no more binary blobs mixing and matching and the headache of trying to get the Android stuff working on a phone anymore. And it's just amazing to see that this is happening and that we can get something that don't require these headaches. So it's just amazing. So
yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm extremely excited about it all, and it's something that I've been very passionate about for a long period of time, and it's great to see the original support. The continued support is also fantastic because then that goes to show that it's not like we sold out from our campaign. The amount of interest in having a phone that's not Android is just huge, right? So be that Ubuntu Touch or Pure OS GNOME, it's really about not Android, and then people are like, now I have control, right? I'm not part of this overall, Google surveillance machine. So it's really very, it's a powerful story, and the way that because we are the hardware maker behind it, and of course we need to bundle that with software, but making sure that users have control and options is why I'm excited also about the UBports partnership.
And that's excellent. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So originally we said that we would keep you for 30 minutes. Are you okay to continue? Because we do have more questions, but otherwise...
Sure, I'm fine, yes.
All right, excellent. Let's see. So Rajier from our forum again asked, how Libre is this whole IMX stack when compared to Intel? Are we going to be looking at liberating firmware blobs or trying to mess with the bootloader or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I touched on it just briefly.
Right.
And so it's very Libre. So the reason we chose the IMX overall architecture is it's ARM-based, but it has a reverse engineered GPU. And so the CPU has no binaries, but a critical step that was taken by the community was to liberate the GPU. And so then that got us to the point where we actually have now a viable platform. At that point, then we're talking about smaller things, USB bring up, video out, meaning the USB-C DisplayPort or HDMI. And so those are things that we continue to evaluate. In some cases, we have come across where like, wait, there is this firmware. And is that something that we need? And turns out that through testing and making sure it's like, actually, we don't need that. So we can kick that out. So right now, the platform is completely Libre. Everything we're testing is also completely Libre. And that's our plan, is to continue to have that. So we have nothing like comparing that to what we deal with in the Intel space, right? Where the Intel management engine, the FSP binary that are all included within Core Boot, right? These are very low level things, but they're still important primarily because they run on the main CPU. So what we take is a pretty hardline approach. If it runs on this main CPU, it needs to be free software. And on the laptop space, there's still more to do at that very, very low level. In the phone, the Librem 5 phone, there is not currently any blockers there. So it's really looking very positive.
Mm-hmm. And you did touch on a couple of other things that, other questions that we had. I mean, the first was, and this is mentioned on your store page, but would it support convergence and video out over Type-C? And yes. And then also, what was the boot firmware going to be? So yes, of course, on the USB-C, that is the plan, and we're planning on one port that would be allowed. Mostly that's because of the CPU only can support that. So, and then the boot firmware, I believe, is U-boot, but we're going to think we're going to have more information published about that, at least within the next month or so, as we get to the build images that we're going to be releasing. So.
Okay, so also I know many people have been wondering about this. We see now in the Android community there is a lot of shift going on and weird design choices, like missing headphone port. Are you guys going to have a headphone port? Yes. And are you guys going to have a notch? So,
well, what do you mean by notch? Can you explain that?
The notch where it goes, where you have a headphone, the microphone to, or the speaker. Where the screen is notched downwards, which has done a huge outrage in the Android community.
You're saying, you're talking about the screen. Okay.
The screen.
I haven't heard that term, so I apologize. So no, our screen is going to be a rectangle. It's going to be 18:9. It's probably going to be a 720 horizontal. And that that's what 1440 720, yeah. And so it's going to be a 2-to-1 pixel ratio, which is also very great. It will have a headphone jack. We're actually going to have a couple more mock-ups are going to be coming out from our industrial design. So the overall approach is industrial design is pretty much done, and that's basically like what it looks like. And actually, I think this week we're going to be putting out a few more mock-ups of that industrial design. And then that carries over to the mechanical design. The mechanical design is the process of really taking that industrial design and making it all actually work. And then including the antenna, which is a challenge. Then all that time is then a big chunk of the time is spent on the EE, which is the PCBA. So we will have a headphone jack because it's important. I still use them, so it's helpful for I think a lot of our team does, and actually being able to also separate those out, so we can have USB Type-C, and then also have the headphone jack. And I think that was all the questions you had.
Yeah, I've just said there's incredibly many people that are you answer there. There has been a huge outbreak, so.
Yeah, I haven't been following along too much with that. I've mostly just noticed the OLED type screens that can have these, as you're calling them, notches. And it's, from our standpoint, it's actually just simpler to do a rectangle. So that's also what's available for, for the screen. We're not trying to invent anything with the screen, right? We're just, 18:9 is a trend. It actually allows 2-to-1 pixel ratio, which is really helpful. So it makes the 5.5 inch phone, like our original mock-ups, what you're going to see is it's just going to be a little bit taller. So an 18.9, and that rather than a 16.9. So our current mock-ups are 16.9. So by moving to 18.9, it gets a little bit longer, but it'll be a rectangle. And you'll start seeing some more of those industrial designs that we're going to publish in the course of the next month or so. And also the screen that we ship with the development kit is very likely to be the screen that we actually will be using in the phone. So the development kit, we're hoping to be kind of like, you think of it like a club sandwich, right? It's going to have all of the pieces in a layer. And so kind of on a, it'll be a little bit thicker so you can separate all the pieces out, have appropriate ports and cables. But we're trying to have that become sort of the top level down, looking at a floor plan would be the floor plan of a phone. So you can kind of get an idea of the size of the screen, the touch interface, how it would generally look if you were to sort of smush that down. And then the actual phone is going to be the, condensed down. But it still is going to be we're probably pushing around a 13 millimeter, 14 millimeter phone. So it's going to be on the thicker side, but not unwieldy.
That is no problem for me.
Yeah. It seems all the feedback we've had so far, it's people are saying almost like you're spending a little too much time worrying about it. So I'm like, okay, great. And so, we also want to utilize that space for battery. So, IMX8 is going to be a bigger power draw. So that's the area we're spending a fair bit of development resources in as well.
That is an excellent choice. Florian, I know that you had a couple of questions that you were putting in the doc here.
Well, actually, one from the German group. Dave wanted to know why GTK was chosen over Qt for the PureOS. I'm not sure if it was a decision over Qt, but at least it was a decision towards GTK. Maybe you can have a few words on that.
Sure. There's a lot of nuances to that one, so I'll try and summarize. We wanted to have a unified stack across all of our devices. We had already been a big supporter of GTK across our laptop line, and a lot of our developers are within the GNOME community. So it's sort of just a natural progression. As you can imagine from that single story thread is if you hire a bunch of people and they say, we're all Rust fans. And you're like, well, sorry, we're going to be doing it in, JavaScript, Node, right? They're going to be like, oh, what are we doing? So they'll complain constantly. So part of it is we've made sure to organize everything towards the GNOME stack because that's what we're trying to do as this unified stack, as the overall business direction. So that has helped lean us towards GTK. Now, we also knew coming into it that on the Qt side, specifically Plasma Mobile, that there's some that where Plasma Mobile is at is farther along than GTK is currently. However, to get to the same point is not something that's unattainable. And what we wanted to do is make sure that we could advance something that we can support across our whole stack rather than, let's say, shifting from GTK to Qt across our other devices. Then, of course, by attending Academy, getting involved in Qt more, that we really warmed up to the idea of saying, this is something that we can clearly support across our devices, and we should embrace that. So you can, of course, run a GTK app within Qt or within Plasma Mobile, and you can run a Qt app within the GNOME space. So being able to kind of not take it like it's a battle any longer and look at it as saying, this is really just a choice that somebody could make, that those are kind of the reasons we ended up in the path that we are on. The advancements we've made, specifically with Phone Shell, have really proven that decision has been a good decision because we've advanced significantly in upstream GNOME. GNOME's going to be a first-class citizen in mobile once again, and then we can continue to advance what we strongly believe in.
We did have one specific question from Jan, who unfortunately his internet died, and his ISP says, well, that's your problem. Was whether or not all these changes to GTK to make it more responsive would land upstream, because that would be really important for us on the Ubuntu Touch side. If that gets into and is usable by X-Wayland and GTK proper, that we could have the same scalable apps running on Ubuntu Touch.
Yes. So the short answer is yes. The longer answer is that it actually is all looking like it's going to advance very quickly. So GTK3 is what we're working on now. GTK4 is also something that is looking like it's going to be able to accept the what we're calling adaptive. A lot of which, because responsive can have can have two meanings. Responsive in our case is like, is the app responding? And so we have sort of modified that to be adaptive, which is that it can run on a smaller screen and be able to modify the applications. There's significant advancements that we've made, which actually has been really profound because these are just simply classes that get changed within GTK. And so it's not a rewrite of applications. It's just simply modifying the application to use this new class if we want to have it be adaptive. So yes, it's going to be upstream. We also at Purism have a very strict approach to upstreaming everything, right? We're not trying to deviate heavily. In some cases, we end up needing to deviate just because of users' rights or because we're advancing some things. But our goal, and we have a really good relationship with both GNOME and KDE, and I also believe with UBports. So as these things advance, then we push upstream. You'll see the benefit by it being within GTK3 and GTK4. And so then you can just pick up the classes that are needed within that, within the GTK environment.
And that, as I said, will be excellent, especially for people who want to run either pure OS apps or just regular desktop apps on their phone.
Yes, exactly.
Desktop apps, I mean, they might be okay on the phone, they might not be, but
yeah,
we'll
we basically take the approach that that no desktop app is going to be okay on the phone without class tweaking, and so and that approach, I guess, to highlight one of the thing that I think is probably going to just put that topic to rest is that we have hired a lot of GNOME developers. So these are people who, by working with the GNOME Foundation, right? You're kind of like, well, are we going to get developers or not? Are they going to? And so we have had applications from GNOME developers and hired them with the specific intention to communicate with the overall community what they're doing. So you'll see a lot of cross posts of what we post on Purism site. It gets posted on Planet GNOME and a few other areas. So it's really exciting because our original goal of pushing upstream, we're following along with very nicely. And that goes from Debian as well, right? So we have Debian developers and we try to push upstream as much as possible. We've made a lot of advancements there. And the same will go for the Linux kernel and any other application upstreams or desktop environment upstreams.
So Purism OS or Pure OS is based on Debian, right? So that means when we finish our Debian project, which is bring our Unity 8 stack over to Debian, so you can be able to install that. How different is Pure OS, which from Debian? Which would it mean like you can just install the same packages on Pure OS as on Debian?
Yes. So Debian and Pure OS. The reason we started Pure OS, so Pure OS is a fork of Debian testing. So we just pull straight from Debian testing. We pull daily, do a complete rebuild, and the differences are really around privacy, security, and the digital rights of users. So we only take Debian main because we avoid Debian contrib or non-free, and by doing that, it gets us to where we're very tightly aligned with Debian. And any changes that we make, we're actually making a change, let's say adding an add-on or a default software that's installed. We recommend that change back up to Debian. So Debian has accepted some changes. In some cases, they're still reviewing, right? Debian for review process is slower than let's say most, and that's obviously one of the benefits that they have of stability. And so we created Pure OS so that we can advance things towards our hardware and then continue to have the conversation to patch upstream, which is actually why it's technically called a blend, which is that we take nearly everything from Debian, modify it to our needs, and also Pure OS is Free Software Foundation endorsed as a distribution. So to answer your question, when you port Unity 8 or bring Unity 8 over, it will, quote unquote, just work. And that's very, very a powerful story because we're at least taking the right approach to have it just work.
Awesome.
There were a couple more questions just on the Librem 5 hardware specifically.
Okay.
First, and I'm sorry, I can't pronounce this name at all, was...
Let's hear you try.
No, I can't read Cyrillic.
Oh. Okay. All right. That'll be a hard try. Well, I'd still like to see you try, but go ahead.
No, that's not happening. Anyway.
All right. What's the
he
question?
asked whether wireless charging is a planned feature, I guess through Qi or whatever other standard is out there right now on the Librem 5.
No, it's not a planned feature with the base unit. The ability to have a USB-C pad and then utilize that would be options, but they would all be aftermarket charging options. So it is something that we would like to see, in future products, but it was just sort of the taking, kind of biting off more than we could chew across all the other pieces we're trying to do. And so we took the approach of trying to really focus on what we knew would be able to work and advance that. And then plus there's all sorts of aftermarket options. And so that was kind of an easier choice to say, hey, let's kind of punt it over to that side.
Mm-hmm. And that makes total sense. Again, in charging battery space, has a final selection been made on battery size? And that might just be after the case is designed.
Yeah, we are leaning towards a larger battery, and it really everything that we are trying to do is saying, how can we get more battery in there? The final decision hasn't been made because, as you're saying, once we get the final PCBA size, it's like, did we actually eke out a little area where we can kind of have a bump in the battery and get a little bit more space? So I'm going to have to hold on answering the details behind that. I'll say that our developers who are and mobile lead are very, very focused on standby mode, battery life. So it's something that they care about and are trying to get the best bang for the buck. But there's not trying to get somebody's hopes up that's going to last, a week or something, but it will have a bigger battery. It's going to be a little bit thicker of a phone. And the reasons for doing so are so that way we can have a large enough battery to actually, power the IMX8M even with the standby modes.
And that's totally understandable.
Mm-hmm. So I would suggest that questioner to kind of follow along once we publish the specs. The battery life is actually probably going to come pretty late, however, or battery exact battery specs, because batteries are, they're very easy to make and they're very quick to provide. So what we're going to do is it's going to probably be some time around. I mean, I could say we might have the answer to that September. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think we will take one last question then. Since we are getting out of time.
Okay.
So I just want to get a more understanding on the hardware side and the kill switch. Going a little bit back to what is it so you can kill switch? You can have Wi-Fi on while you have a kill switch on the radio, or is it one button that turns off everything and you have no connection?
Yes. So the kill switches, the design's going to be most likely, and I think we're pretty much solid on having a separate Wi-Fi Bluetooth as one kill switch, a separate kill switch as cellular baseband, and then a third kill switch for microphone camera. What we're possibly doing is going to be moving the camera to shutter kill switch, and then having it be a separate one for the microphone. However, we've also kind of come across the ability to have the hardware kill switch that can, let's say, sever all sensors. And then if you toggle them on, let's say the actual physical switch, you toggle it off, all sensors are gone. That's accelerometer, right? GPS. And then what we do is, if you toggle it on, then we can have a software interface that shows you which ones you'd like to toggle on or off, which would actually be a hardware gate that we would, so it'd still be a circuit that we toggle on or off, but we would be toggling it on or off for those via the software. So in that case, if we decide that, then that third kill switch would be a sensors kill switch. And we're really pushing for that because I think it'd be really cool, right? So you can say all sensors are dead, and then you can toggle it back on, and then you can actually still hardware kill through the software interface the individual sensors that you'd like to kill, including microphone.
Exactly what you're saying here is this is huge, because I think most people don't know how much fingerprinting you can do with just a small amount of data getting from the sensors and from the microphone. Even though most people think about cellular and Wi-Fi and GPS are the most critical parts, but you can do a lot with information of movement, of body movement, and everything. So this is really powerful.
Yeah. So I mean, the current design is, as I said, where that last one is kind of an all sensors approach, and I do think that that's really the route we're going to take. And our hardware designers have some, I mean, talking with them has been fantastic, because it's, I'm learning a lot about, like, when I say this is what I'd like to do, and they're proposing, I don't want to have, 15 dip switches down the side of the phone. And so this approach of, having it be elegant, and having an approach where it's like, kill them all, and then you can, toggle on, and then you can still, what was fascinating for me to learn was that, this ability to have it where the software can still control and have it be at the circuit level, it's toggling them off. And so then what we're also looking to do is say, for those people who are like, well, it's software driven, we're also looking to have it be LEDs. So we can actually have LEDs that light for your sensors, right? Yeah. So you can actually see, like, oh, okay, without having a bunch of dip switches, you can actually see, okay, I'm toggling on and off, and the LED is confirming that that's actually a hardware circuit, does not have that power any longer. And so those are some things that we're toying with, and we are well, let's say probably about another month and a half away from having the schematics finalized, where we can really pin all those pieces down. So we're advancing with that as our story, and if we come across a blocker, right, it might change, which is why I'm not committing to it today, but that's our intention.
And last one now is, I mentioned GPS. Will it have GPS?
Yes.
And will that be a separate one, or will that be combined with Wi-Fi or cellular?
That's actually a separate sensor. So it's it's a separate little integrated circuit. And of course, GPS is fine as a chip. It's all the software that comes bundled with the GPS that makes it where it sends out your GPS location, right? So having a chip that knows where you're located by the broadcast signal is a perfectly acceptable security story. So, but being able to, that would be included in the sensors, right? If we toggle all sensors, it would say, kill the integrated circuit of that center as well, or primarily if it's not power, in some cases, it would be the data connection for them, so that they're just not on the device.
Okay. Well, that clock means that we have reached about the end of our time here today. So, Todd, I think this was extremely informative for both our and your communities, and I really thank you for coming on with us today.
Oh yeah, I appreciate it. It's been fantastic. It's my favorite subject, so I'm more than happy to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Most of the podcasts I listen to have mentioned you guys every single week, so your PR team doing good.
Excellent.
So thank you again for being on. We will see. Oh, let's try that again. This has been the UBports Community Update, episode 27. If you'd like to find us while we're not here online, you can find us on all of the non-free social networks that you would like: Facebook, Twitter, as well as some free ones such as Mastodon and Diaspora. And all of those links will be down in the description. You can also chat with us on Telegram at UBports, IRC at #UBports on Freenode, or Matrix, we are #UBports:/matrix.org. Thank you everyone so much for watching today. I hope that you've enjoyed this episode. Please leave a comment to let us know what you thought. And I don't think it really helps anything, but smash the like button. I think that's how you say that. You all have a great day, evening, night, and we will see you in the next one. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.